Hey everyone, I'm Kate Kennedy, and it has been over a month now since we did our last video for 100 Days of Kane, PA. And I had told you that we would continue to hear stories some Wednesday nights from the Kane Historic Preservation Society about stories of Kane's history. And we thought tonight would be a great night to start. With Halloween being tomorrow, we wanted to have someone here share a story that was kind of scary about Kane. So Wendy Oakes is here tonight, and she's going to share some stories about the cemeteries here in Kane. I'm going to go around and we'll go over and say hello. Hi, Wendy.
Hello.
I'm so happy to see you again. It's been too long. Well, hey, thanks so much for joining us tonight, or letting us join you, I guess. And we're going to talk about some of the cemeteries around and some of the history of that. So would you tell us about Kane's first cemeteries?
Okay. You know, everybody knows where the cemeteries are now, up on Cemetery Hill. But originally, the first cemeteries were here inside the borough. Literally in town where buildings are now.
Isn't that hard to imagine? Oh, so where was like one of the very first ones?
One of the very first ones was the Catholic cemetery, and the original Catholic church sat where the Woods and Baker building is now. It burnt down, but the cemetery was behind it. So they started, burying some of the people back there. Plus the railroad used that area for burials for their laborers.
Okay, so
there were several people. I mean, there was quite a few people back in that area buried.
So the first cemetery was behind the First Catholic Church, which is on Fraley Street, where Woods, Baker, and Ross was. And then what happened to it?
It burnt down. And
the church burnt down.
The church burnt down, and the area behind there had been kind of swampy, so they decided not to leave the cemetery there, and they moved it. So they moved the bodies up to where the Catholic cemetery is now. But I'll read this exactly as we have it in the story. It says, nearly all bodies were reinterred. So that right there gives you a clue. Nearly in what is now the Catholic cemetery at the corner of the cemetery at JoJo Road. I am told that a few bodies, mostly children, were never removed. And so this is in the Commons. This was in the Commons.
What building is where the Catholic Church was? What building today is where the Catholic?
Woods and Baker building.
Okay, so behind.
Woods and Baker and Ross.
So it was the Catholic Church. It burnt down, and then
behind that, where the Commons are, where the parking lots and everything are now, was a cemetery, and they removed nearly all the bodies.
Oh my gosh!
When they reinterred them, they left the children. Why would they leave the children? So that's kind of spooky. I mean, what happens when you move a grave?
Right, right.
At least what some people think would happen. It disturbs the graves. It
disturbs
the people.
Yeah,
I've never heard any stories about seeing any, children running around there that shouldn't be there, but
who knows what we'll learn from this.
So evidently there's children buried underneath parking lots with no
That's so interesting. I never had heard that before. Was there any other cemeteries in town?
Yes, there was another cemetery, and that was out by where Save-A-Lot is now. It was out in the woods, because the original Fraley Street did not go out that way. Wetmore Avenue was actually the road that went out of town. So the North Fraley Street was not built at that time. Flint Bottle Company came in and bought that property and wanted to build a factory there. And the road, that's when they had North Fraley built out towards that way. But there was a cemetery right there, and they moved those bodies also. They went to different places. Those bodies were moved to Forest Lawn, the Catholic cemetery, some of the Swedish cemeteries that were around. But there was several bodies up there. Now, that one, from what I've read, all the bodies were moved, they say.
Yeah.
They say.
Around what year was all of this happening?
Catholic cemetery would have been probably the 1870s. The Flint Bottle Company didn't come in until probably about the 1900s.
Okay, so very early in Kane's history. Yeah.
Right.
Very interesting.
Before the Forest Lawn and the Tabor Lutheran Cemetery and the Catholic Cemetery up there.
Are there any other stories about any kind of burials in town?
There is. Now, from the story we have is that there was a hobo if nobody knows what a hobo is, he's somebody who like a bum. He would hop trains and go from town to town and bum whatever they could off of. Maybe they would ask for work for a day just to earn a little bit of money. But evidently he died here in Kane. We don't know his name. We don't know where he was from. We just know that this hobo died, Basically, on the other side of the railroad tracks behind the commons, the west side of the railroad tracks, they basically dug a hole and buried him. And he's still back there from what we found out, and what I have a sheet that somebody dug into the history. He was never reinterred anywhere else. So there is the body of a hobo on the west side of the tracks behind the commons.
Who knew?
So yeah, so if you're walking down the tracks and you see a bum walking down the tracks and he just disappears on you, you know who you just saw.
So interesting. Well, thank you, Wendy. I had no idea. This is all new information to me tonight. Is there anything else that you wanted to share that you didn't get a chance to?
I don't think so. This is a short and sweet night.
Short and sweet. No, but very informative. And we'll be back, don't you worry, to get more stories from you sometime
maybe
soon.
You can get Dick or John to tell their spooky stories sometime, but
we'll have to ask. All right, thanks, Wendy. And thank you guys for tuning in. Did you guys know that there were cemeteries originally in the borough of Kane? I had no idea. And I think it's so interesting to learn about the different ways that the cemeteries were moved, and the commons. Who knew that there was so much activity back there? Well, tomorrow's Halloween, and just a reminder to you guys that trick or treat is tomorrow night from 6 to 8 p.m. in the borough of Kane. Porch light invitation. So if a porch light is on, you're welcome to go up and ask for a trick or treat. And then also, one last thing I would like to ask is if you have any spooky stories about Kane that you would like to share, feel free to go ahead and do that in the comments. We'll go ahead and be sharing stories from the depot again in the future, and we'll be sharing some stories from more citizens and residents of Kane in the future as well. But just wanted to get back in the rhythm tonight with a spooky story from the Kane Historic Preservation Society. So thanks, Wendy, for sharing, and thank you guys again for tuning in, and we'll see you again sometime real soon.